Hello and welcome to Saturday Science Club here on the Cosmic Shambles Network. It's week 8 now, nearly, just about to be, of lockdown, and we're still here, but we have not run out of science yet. So we have plenty of things to show you today, lots of things to play with, lots of things for you to join in with. So actually, while I think about it, if you would like to join in as we're going along, the things you can think about finding, you've got a bit of time, are a mirror and some paper and a pen to write with, and then something that can block your view of the paper, like a big book that can stand on end. So this is something that you can try afterwards as well. But if you're feeling super keen and want to join in with what Ginny's got lined up for us all, that's what you need. So a mirror, some paper, a pen, and something to block your view of the paper, which could be a big book or something similar standing on its end. So let's do the housekeeping. First of all, we don't forget there is, we've been talking about a tip jar in the past few weeks. We'd also like to remind you that there is a Patreon donation page and support page for Cosmic Shambles. You can find it on patreon.com/bookshambles. And if you'd like to support these shows or other things that we do, because there are lots and lots of things that happen on the Cosmic Shambles Network, it's probably as most of you know, then please go to Patreon and do support us if you can, because we would really appreciate that. Oh yes, tomorrow we have our regular science question and answer session, and tomorrow it will be Robin and me and Hannah Fry and John Butterworth. So if you've got questions about maths or particle physics or oceans and bubbles or anything else that has been rattling around in your mind, don't let those questions fall down the back of the sofa. Bring them out into the light, send them to us, and we'll do our best to answer them. So that will be live at 3 p.m. tomorrow. And that is all the admin. So we can get on with all the bits of science that we've got to play with this morning. And I'm going to start with something that you can do this at home, but you won't be able to set up all the bits and pieces in the time here. But I'll show you what I did. So what I did was I acquired a red cabbage, and then I chopped a bit off it. And the bit that I chopped off, and you need a lot for this, it only has to be a little bit, I boiled it. So I just put it in a pan with some water, and I boiled it for a bit, and then I took the cabbage out, and I got a load of coloured liquid. Now this is the fun stuff, because you can do lots of stuff with this. It specifically works very well with red cabbage, so don't try using beetroot or anything else. The red cabbage is what you need. And the thing that this lets you do is test how acid or alkaline something is. And so I'm going to show you a couple of examples, and then I'll tell you what's going on. I've not got enough hands here. I've got a lemon and a little pot here. These are egg cups, but I've never ever put eggs in them. So I'm going to squeeze some. What I'm going to do is squeeze lemon juice in my face, which is not the recommended way of doing this. Right, it's got a pip in it as well, but that's all right. And now I'm going to. So I'm the sort of person that has pipettes at home, but you don't need a pipette. So this is the liquid that came from the boiled cabbage, what's in the pipette. And you can see it's this beautiful blue colour. And I'm now going to put that in here with the lemon juice. And you can see it's gone pink. I'm going to hold that up. So it's got a beautiful pink colour. And the reason it's gone pink is that this is an indicator. It's just told us that the lemon juice is acid, which we sort of knew, but that's the test we need to confirm that everything is working as we think it should. And the way that this works is that what acid or alkaline things are is that water molecules have a big oxygen atom at their centre and two little hydrogens that sit like Mickey Mouse ears. But when you put them in water, one of those ears quite often wanders off. So you have a big oxygen and a hydrogen, or you have a little hydrogen by itself. And they float around in the water a little bit separate. But if you have some other chemistry, which means there's more than one of them than the other, then you get something which is either acid or alkaline. And so there are some chemicals that can change colour when they discover that there's more of those little hydrogen ions or more of the hydroxide ions. So with the lemon juice, we've made that go pink. So what else have we got? So you will find lots of things in your kitchen that you can use to test to see how acid or alkaline they are. Now I've got my next one here. Spilling everything everywhere. So what I've got here, this is a laundry powder, and it's not the sort of thing that you might think about. Actually, maybe we'll put it. I'll put it in here. See if it dissolves. So I'm gonna put laundry powder into a little bit of water and stir it up. Okay, so we've got laundry powder, and whatever is in there is very definitely white. So now what I'm going to do is take here's my cabbage water, and I'm going to put, so nice blue cabbage water, where are we going? Nice blue cabbage water gone in here. And you can see it's gone green. It's gone this, I'm going to stick a bit more in because it's a bit dilute. It looks thoroughly disgusting, by the way. It's got white bits floating about at the bottom. But you can see it's very definitely gone green. And if you do that with laundry powder by itself, let's see if I've got that, it's even more. So this is the alkaline end of the scale now. So here's our blue. There's just some powder. And I'm going to stick that in there. You can't see it. It's gone bright yellow, basically. It's a little bit more dilute. So what's going on here is that and now it looks like I've got witches' potions everywhere. The cabbage water, what's going on is it's got a compound in there. It's got a type of pigment it's got a very long name. It's called an anthocyanin. But it's got a very sensitive molecular structure. The bits of it that generate the colour are very sensitive to whether there's more hydrogen ions in the water, which makes something acid, or more hydroxide, which makes it alkaline. And so if you put this cabbage water on things, it will change colour depending on whether something is acid or alkaline. So it's quite safe. I wouldn't recommend, it's perfectly safe to eat. It is quite disgusting, so I don't recommend that. But you can take it around your house and try putting it on things that people don't mind and see what colour they go. And a good way to start is with things that you know about. So we know that washing powder is very alkaline. We know that lemon juice is a little bit acid. It will go an amazing range of colours. So go around and put it on things, and you can see how acid or alkaline your surroundings are. And you might surprise you what you find out, because there is very definitely more of one than the other. And if you really get enthusiastic, you can do that with your food, but then you have to eat something that tastes of cabbage, and that may not go with the thing that you are eating. But you can do it if you would like. If you want to make cookies or muffins with different pHs and flavour them with cabbage water, they will go different colours, but then you will have to also eat them. So that is my recommendation, should you have a bit of spare time and a red cabbage this afternoon. Oh, yes, and I should have said at the beginning, actually, if you've got any questions about any of the things that we are doing, do please tweet them at us, or send them via the various Cosmic Shambles, whatever your route to us is. You'll find a way to either send us an email or send us a tweet. Do send us questions, because we'll be answering your questions at the end. So any of us, do send your questions in, and we will do our best to answer them right here, doing that live. So next up, now we've dealt with the cabbage part of the morning, we have Bobby Seagull, who is a mathematician, a teacher and writer, and does lots of things to do with maths. And I think he's got a puzzle for us.
Yes, I do. Good morning, Helen. Good morning to all our wonderful viewers on a Saturday morning. So here goes. So this is a puzzle that I've taken from my book, The Life-Changing Magic of Numbers, which I've seen elsewhere. So it's not my puzzle per se. So the only thing you need for this is an ability to do the 9 times table. So if you're age 6 or 7, I hope you know the 9 times table trick of how to do 9 times table. Okay, so what you need to do is think of a number from 1 to 10. Helen, you're playing along with me?
Yes.
Okay, number from 1 to 10. Okay. And now multiply this number by 9.
Okay.
Okay, if it's a 2-digit number, add the 2 digits together.
Okay.
Yep, and now subtract 5 from this number.
Okay.
So imagine A is 1, B is 2, C is 3, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Your number is a letter.
Yep.
Yep. Now with this letter, think of a country that begins with that letter.
Okay.
Okay, with the last letter of this country, pick an animal that begins with that.
Okay.
And now finally, with the last letter of the animal's name, pick a color that begins with that letter.
Okay.
And are you thinking of an orange kangaroo in Denmark?
I am, yes.
Yes, you.
Very good.
Thing is, sometimes when this comes out, people think of a turquoise ant in Dominica or an aqua iguana in Djibouti. So I've done this with my students in secondary and early primary, late primary, and sometimes kids try and be cheeky and think of really difficult ones. But generally, as long as you do the calculation correct, we should get to Denmark, and then from there we hopefully end up with a kangaroo that's orange.
Well, I'm not sure what the kangaroo might think about that. So why does that work? What's going on there?
Yeah, so it works because any number, any multiple of 9, the digits when you add them together are always 9. So 9, 18, 27, 36, 45. And again, for kids that are watching here, the 9 times table trick is, if 9 times 3, if you drop your third finger, you get 27. If you're doing 9 times 7, you drop your 7th finger, you get 6 10s and 3, 63. So you're always getting the sum of the digits adding up to 9. So with that 9 basis, then you can play along with that. You can change it to subtract 6 to get the letter C, but C has lots more countries, like there's Cameroon, Chile, China. D is the one where most people in Europe will end up picking Denmark. If I did this in Africa, I might get Djibouti. Or if I did this in the Caribbean, I might get Dominica or Dominican Republic. But in Europe, generally, people end up with Denmark. And then with the Denmark, it's a bit of psychology. We hope people end up with kangaroo rather than koala. And then you hope they end up with orange rather than some sort of strange color. And then again, in schools, when you put up, especially in primary school, when you put up I read your mind, and you put up an orange kangaroo inside a Denmark flag, and the kids are like, oh my God, Mr. Seagull, are you a mind reader? I'm like, no, I'm not a mind reader. It's just maths with a little bit of psychology.
So, well, it's great. Yeah, it's nice. And it's worrying in a way. Isn't it? Because it's so easy to do. And part of the reason that it was so, I guess, that made it very predictable for you was that you were asking me questions very fast. I didn't have time to think of awkward countries, which is what I would normally be doing.
It's exactly an immediate response. If you're someone pausing and saying, why am I doing this? If they're questioning it, and then they might, they start writing down the numbers or put it down algebraically, then they'll realize I'm setting them up. But if you do it promptly, like in a bar or at a party, then hopefully they should end up with the same thing. Actually, what's really curious is, I love my facts. There is actually something called the Order of the Elephant in Denmark, and it's a royal house there. So there is that. So in Denmark, this puzzle would have an even more particular resonance.
There is, because of the brewery, right? The Carlsberg Brewery.
Yeah.
Carlsberg Brewery, because I had stayed there, because I went for a science festival, and they had these great big elephants holding up pillars on the way to the science festival, and they are there because of Denmark has this very tight relationship with Copenhagen. But it's great. More cities should have great big stone elephants around them, I think. I really like that. So what else is in your book, Bobby? What else have you got? Is it just puzzles, or is it
so I think it's partly autobiographical, partly like an ode to maths and numbers. And it's called The Life-Changing Magic of Numbers. And the reason it's life-changing is I try to show how maths changed my life. So again, I start off in my early days in primary school talking about how football stickers and stats got me into maths. Then I talk about like my interest in magic, my interest in, or lack of interest in cooking, and how actually cooking is all about numbers.
It's all about numbers. Yeah, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I know, exactly. Then I talk about sport. You can end up with amusing chapters talking about how maths could, in theory, help me with dating. I've been perennially single, and I've been on dates where I try to apply maths formulas. And I've had a date before saying, "Am I just part of your 1/e optimal stopping theory?" I said, "No. That's for a book. But in real life, I wouldn't apply optimal stopping theory." So you're just trying to like have a quirky look at how maths can help you with your daily life, as it were.
And you're clearly a football. Are you missing your football now? You've got your football shirt on the wall behind you there.
I even got a Brazil. I've got my waistcoat on, but it's Saturday. I've got my Brazil shirt on underneath.
I like that. It's perfect cosmic shambles dressing. Perfect cosmic shambles dressing up. Actually, you've got the veneer of respectability, but underneath.
Exactly.
Fabulous. Great. Well, we will come back to you with some questions later, Bobby. Do send in your questions if you've got anything that strikes you from all of that you would like to ask. And we are going to move on now to Ginny Smith, who is fascinated by how the brain works. You'll have seen her here before on Family Science Club, and she has got something. I've already had to do this, and it definitely messes with you a little bit. So Ginny.
Okay, so I thought lots of us at the moment are in lockdown and we're spending our time learning new things. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about it and then set you a learning challenge. So start with the basics. Inside our brain, we have billions of nerve cells or neurons, which look a little bit like this. So this is Nina, my giant neuron, and you can see she's got a sort of long part in the middle, and that allows her to send messages really, really quickly all around the brain. And then she's got these frondy bits at both ends. And they allow each neuron to connect up with lots and lots of other neurons. And it's actually these frondy bits that are really important for learning. Because when we learn new things, what's happening is we're actually making new connections between neurons or strengthening and changing the ones that we already have. And all of that is happening at the very ends of neurons, what we call synapses, the little gap between where one neuron ends and the next one starts. So that's what's going on in our brain when we learn new things. But there are lots of different types of learning. So the thing that we probably think about most often when we think about learning is the stuff you learn in school, you know, what's the capital of France, or how do you do your 9 times table, those kind of facts that you have to store in your brain. And when we're learning that kind of thing, what we have to do is repeat it a lot. We have to practice it, we have to revise. And every time we do that, we're activating these neurons and we're strengthening the connections between them. But we now know that there are actually lots of different types of learning, and some of them use different parts of the brain. And one of the reasons we know this was because of a gentleman who was known as HM, and he had really bad epilepsy, so he had to undergo brain surgery to try and stop him from having these fits that were really affecting his life. But unfortunately, the brain surgery had a really nasty side effect. Now, this was quite a long time ago, and it has come on along since then. But when Henry, which was his name, he was known as HM until he died, and then we found out his name was Henry. When he woke up, it turned out he couldn't make any new memories. So he could still remember things from his childhood, but if you introduced him to a new person, he'd forget them within a couple of minutes. So scientists started studying him, and they discovered that the part of his brain that was affected by the brain surgery was kind of deep inside. So I've got a model brain here, and to find that bit, what I'd have to do is open it up, and it would be sort of buried inside here. It's an area called the hippocampus, and he had damage to that area and all around it. And that really affected his memory for facts, and also his memory for things that happened in his life. So he couldn't remember what he had for breakfast or what he did yesterday. But when they started doing more experiments on him, they discovered that there was one type of learning and memory where his brain could still make new memories. And that was what we call motor learning. So it's learning skills. So that might be something like playing the piano or riding a bike. It's the kind of learning that if you read about it in a book, you can't then just go and do it. You have to physically go through the motions. It doesn't matter how long someone spent trying to tell you how to ride a bicycle. Helen could tell you all the physics of what you have to do, but you couldn't then, if you've never ridden one before, get on a bike and ride it. And that's because your brain has to learn it in a different way. And actually, it uses different parts of the brain. So it uses this part on the side called the motor cortex, which controls your movements. And it uses this big, funny shaped bit at the bottom here, which actually sits just above your spinal cord in your neck at the back. So it's completely different parts of the brain. And that's why Henry could still do motor learning. So what I thought we would do is we would have a go at testing your motor learning. And we're going to use one of the tasks that the scientists used on Henry, which is called mirror drawing. So to set this up, we're just going to move the camera a little bit. And what you're going to need is a mirror. And you need to pop that in front of you on the table. And then you're going to need your piece of paper. So I've got a piece of paper here. I thought I had a blank one. I've got a piece of paper here. And then you need something to act as a barrier. So you can use a book, or I've got 2 water bottles, which I'm going to pop on the table there. And I'm going to put them sort of so they're parallel to my arm, and then pop a tea towel over them. So what's important is that when I look in the mirror, I should be able to see the piece of paper. I should be able to see my hand with the pen in the mirror, but I shouldn't be able to see my actual hand. So I have to sort of lean this way slightly, and then I can't see my actual hand. Now, what you're going to do once you're set up is you're going to draw some dots. So there's 2 options here. You can start with the easy option, which is to draw 4 dots like that in a sort of diamond shape. If you try that and you find it too easy, you can draw 10 dots. So you draw a pentagon, 5 in the middle.
Ginny, just move your hand down. Ginny, move your hand down a little bit because you're.
Sorry.
There you go.
See what I'm doing very well. Does that show?
Yes.
Okay, so we've got 5 dots in the middle and then 5 around the edge, or you've just got 4 in a diamond. So once you've drawn your dots, so I'm going to draw myself some dots, and I'm going to do this looking at a piece of paper, because that's fine. Then you get yourself organised so that, can you see what I'm drawing at the moment?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. So I'm going to get myself so that I can only see my hand in the mirror. Just going to tweak that a little bit. I can't see my actual hand. And now what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and join up the dots to make a star. Okay. Now it sounds really, really simple, but I'm having to move my hand differently to how I normally would, because I'm looking in a mirror, and that means everything's sort of flipped. Now, I'm doing quite well. I'm quite proud of this, but this is because I practiced this quite a lot yesterday when I was working out how to do this demo. And hopefully, if you're trying this at home, you will find that you are finding it, oh, this bit's hard, quite challenging. I found that some of the angles are harder than others to do. Oh, yeah, went a bit wonky there. So all you have to do is join up those dots, but your brain isn't used to moving your hand whilst looking at a mirror image. So it can be really difficult to work out how to move your hand so that it works. Okay, if we just come back so that I'm back on the screen. Now, I practiced this quite a lot yesterday, and I didn't do it in a very organised way. So as a good scientist, I had to go and find a new subject. So I got my husband to try it, and I wanted to show you his results. So I'm going to hold these up. I might just come a little bit closer to the camera. Here we go. So this was his first attempt over here, and you can see he went all over the place in a couple of places. And then number 2 is a bit better, but still quite wonky in a few places. But the more he did it, the more times he tried. So I got him to do it 5, 6 was getting a bit better, 7, 8. He got better at it. And that's because our brains can learn. They can change. The more you practice something, the more you're building those connections, and the more you're changing your brain, and actually you can get better at things. And with Henry, they found that although he didn't remember ever doing the task before, when they kept bringing him back and getting him to do it again and again, he got better at it. So his brain was learning without even realising it was doing it. Now, Helen, did you have time to do a couple
I
of
did.
stars
Yeah,
for us?
so I've got I did this in a bit of a hurry, but I did how quickly it changed. What was amazing is how quickly it changed. So this was my first attempt, and you can see that the corners are hard. When you get to a corner and you have to work out which way, so I was trying a few directions, and then when it looked like the right way, I would go that way. And then this is the next one. And then getting slowly better here. So I only had time to do 6. So this was my final one. So I was doing it in a bit of a hurry, but this is maybe it took me 4 minutes to do all of those, which is astonishingly quick. I mean, I've done some things like this before where your brain has to learn, like those things where there are the funny glasses that send everything to the side. And the first thing, it feels impossible, but your brain learns so quickly, Ginny. I mean, it's astonishing. And is that really, there's what's happening inside my brain to make that change happen so quickly?
So there are a few different ways synapses, which are those gaps between neurons. And we might think of the obvious way of doing it is actually growing new bits of cells, but that takes a really long time. So you can't do that very quickly. But what you can do is you can change the chemicals that are used, because what happens is when a signal gets sent along a neuron, when it reaches the end, that signal has to get to the next neuron. So the first neuron kind of spits out chemicals, and they get detected by the second neuron, and that's what sends the message. So the quickest thing that can happen in our brain for learning is that the first neuron can start spitting out extra chemicals. So when the signal comes in, rather than just spitting out a few, it spits out lots of them, and that makes it quicker for the signal to get across the synapse. Then if you keep practicing, the second synapse can actually grow more receptors. So when I'm doing this bit in a show, what I do is I get a bunch of kids up and I get one of them to be the first neuron and they have to throw ping pong balls. And then I get another one to be the second neuron and they have bags that they have to catch the ping pong balls in. And if you have more people with bags to catch those ping pong balls, you catch them faster. So those are two ways, and those are really quite quick. They can happen within minutes, as we've seen. And then if you keep practicing, if you kept doing this over and over again for days or weeks, then you can actually change the shape of the synapses, the shape of the neurons, growing more dendrites, making more connections. And what's really amazing is I actually noticed that I tried this a few times yesterday and I got better, but it wasn't like a huge difference. And then when I tried it today, it seemed so much easier. So I haven't actually looked into whether there have been any studies on this yet, but we do know that for a lot of different skills and facts, sleep is really, really important, and it really helps us strengthen those memories. So I think there might be a sleep effect here. So I'd be really interested if anyone tries this at home, do 8 today, go to sleep, and then get up tomorrow and do a couple more and tell me if it was easier tomorrow morning.
So yeah, and I think this has been there's been used in history as almost a secret language, hasn't it? Was it Leonardo da Vinci had a mirror? He wrote in a mirror. He wrote in a mirror, and so it looked backwards to everybody else, but he could read it, and so it was like, and he taught himself to do it so well that he could just write normally in a mirror. But
so I tried doing a few. I found I was drawing them the right way round, even when looking in the mirror. And I think it's just because I've written letters so many times in my life that I could do them without thinking about. So I think it has to be a shape that you haven't overlearned, is what we say. So those connections aren't quite so strong. I've drawn a few stars in my life, but not as many as I have A's and B's and things. So I don't know that shape quite so well.
And we should mention to the audience that we have a little documentary series coming up that we filmed, Ginny and I, with the European Space Agency, and the trailer for it will go out tomorrow, I think, and then there's various episodes. But we're looking at the experiments that happen in zero gravity, and we did talk to astronauts about how they learn in zero gravity. So if you're interested in this topic, there is a little bit more coming up. Look out for those ESA documentaries in the next week or two, because there's loads of stuff in there, and we've got people like Tim Peake commenting on it. So keep an eye out for that. So now we're going to deal with some questions that we have had sent in. So you've still got time to send some in if you've got some questions. Let's take Vanessa's question here. So Bobby, this might be one for you. Yes. Is there a maths trick that even though you know how it works, you still can't quite believe it because it's just so odd?
Yes, I've got one. So I asked you to work out 4% of 75 on the spot. Even myself, if I ask that question, like 4% of 75, I'm like, oh, scratching my head. What is it? What do I do? But if I told you, flip it round and say 75% of 4, and that's a lot easier. That's just 3. And then if I get another one, if I said, what's 18% of 50? Like 18% of 50, I'm like, oh my God, I should know this. But if I flip that around and ask, what's 50% of 18? That's 9. And then the way it works with percentages is that if you do X percentage of Y, it's the same as doing Y percentage of X. And it's a really simple bit of school maths, but even myself as a teacher and someone at the maths at university, I still find that a bit like, oh, it can't be that straightforward, but it really is. You can swap the percentages around with the amount you're calculating. It still works. It's a really beautiful little trick, I think.
Well, it's one of the lovely things about maths, isn't it? Is that the whole point of maths is to take you away from your brain trying to cut corners, because our brains are really good at cutting corners. And so we have what we expect. And maths is all about taking that, trying to stop you doing all of that, isn't it?
Totally.
Do you want to say a little bit just about that, about the way our brains kind of make things up a little bit? You know, why do we find maths so hard? Why do so many people find maths hard?
I think it's a combination of our brains. But I think what it's taught me is more to do with the fact that at school, imagine comparing a maths lesson with an English lesson. In a maths lesson, you'll do year 3, year 4, lots of questions, and the teacher will come around with a pen, tick, tick, cross, cross, tick, and then you'll get I've got 8 out of 10 on this topic, I'm good, or I got 2 out of 10. So you either think of yourself as someone that can or can't do maths. Whereas in English, the teacher will come and say, add some more similes, add some more colourful language. It's more of a sliding scale. Whereas maths, it tends to be quite polarizing. So from a young age, people think they either are competent or not competent. And because of that, it shapes our perceptions in society And in fact, next week,
learning. We are all still learning. I mean, that's the good thing, isn't it? Is that if you get it wrong, then you learn and you get it right next time.
Exactly, it's the process. Again, too many young people often think if they get the question wrong, oh, I can't do it at all. But actually, they made steps along the way. Maybe the final answer wasn't correct, but actually they did sort of have mental processes. Their brain was functioning, but it's just that final thing that makes them think they can't do it. Actually, but they did loads of it on the way up there. Whereas in an English essay, you would never say just because your ending was terrible, the whole of the book was horrendous. You just maybe work in the ending. Whereas in maths, people are quite fixated by the answer sometimes, rather than the process to get there.
But it's a bit like baking a cake in that regard, isn't it? You can do all the steps right along the way, and then someone comes along and opens the oven door, and then it all goes wrong. We've got you here. Let's just maybe take on this question of why is it so hard for us to learn logical things? Our brains are always looking for shortcuts and patterns, and maths is all about stopping all of that. And yet that is how our brains work, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think you have to think about the fact that we haven't been doing maths, or at least we haven't been doing the complexity of maths that we now try and do for very long in evolutionary history. So actually, when it comes to really simple maths, like are there more berries on that bush or that bush, our brains are quite good at that. They're quite good at those kind of general assumptions. And there's even some evidence that babies can sort of tell number sense in terms of which has more and which has less. But you're right, the kind of complexity of maths that we do now isn't very intuitive for our brains. And it's just because it's hard to kind of relate it to how the world works. We've evolved in a world where maybe we're in a small group and we can keep track of what's going on in that kind of small group of numbers, but then trying to think in terms of percentages, and it's just not something that our ancestors would have come into connection with.
We've got these really flexible brains, as you've shown, so we can all learn. That's the. I think I agree with Bobby a lot. I think I agree with Bobby. A lot of the stuff about maths is it's not giving up, because you do get better.
And there's actually some really interesting studies how people can get themselves into a state where they feel like they can't do it, as you say, and actually that is much more harmful than anything. And while our brains may not have naturally evolved to do quadratic equations, that doesn't mean we can't learn them. One of the great things about humans is we're born really undercooked compared to a lot of other animals. Our babies are completely useless compared to like a baby giraffe or a kitten or something. They can do a lot more than our babies can. But that's because we're born with these brains that are designed to soak up experiences and new things, and they've made lots of these connections, but they're ready and primed to change them depending on what inputs we put in. So the more we practice, the more we surround ourselves with maths and numbers and things, we can get there.
So all the kids out there who are watching, what you have in our brains that the three of us don't have anymore because we're now too old, is this forest of connections which is doing loads and loads of things. And as you're training it, you're actually building your brain for the future. So that's why school and learning is important. Even if you can't go to physical school at the moment, that's why learning is important now, because your brain is building all this stuff. Okay, we've got another question that has been emailed in to us from Nisha, and she has asked, what's déjà vu? So this is one for you, Ginny.
Oh, I love this question. It's some kind of glitch in the brain, but scientists don't know what's causing it. And one of the
big reasons, what it is to start with.
I'm sorry, yes. So déjà vu is this weird feeling that people sometimes get when you say walk into a room and you feel like you've been there, feel like you know that you haven't. So it's an experience that you know is new, but there's some element of familiarity to it. And one of the reasons it's so hard to study is one of the main ways that scientists can work out what's going on in the brain when something happens is we put people in brain scanners and we look at the activity in their brain when, say, they're doing maths. And we can say, oh, great, this bit of the brain is active when you do maths. That must be involved in maths. The problem is no one has worked out how to make someone experience déjà vu. So we can't put people in a brain scanner and just wait for them to have déjà vu, because we could be waiting years, or they might never have it because they're in a brain scanner and it's not a new experience. So that makes it really, really hard to study. But there are some theories. So one theory is that we actually have multiple pathways that go from our eyes to our brain that tell our brain about kind of different aspects of what we're looking at. So one idea is that if there's a bit of a glitch in one of the pathways, so that kind of slows it down, the information reaches the brain through the first pathway and then slightly later reaches the brain through the second pathway. And our brain might then interpret that as, oh, I've seen this before. And actually you saw it before, but like a millisecond ago. Another theory is that there is an element in the environment that's familiar. So maybe you've walked into a brand new room and you've got déjà vu. And what's actually happened is the carpet is the same colour as the carpet in your grandma's house. But your brain hasn't actually worked out that that's the link. It's just gone, something in here is familiar, but it can't work out what it is. And so that's what causes déjà vu. Those are the two best theories I've come across, but to be honest, we don't know. Brains are mysterious.
I love the idea that you can't study it because you can't make it happen. That's great. Okay, we've got another question here from Lucas for Bobby, I think, which is, well, may possibly for all of us, which is which bit of maths did you find hardest at school?
This addresses the question of what is maths. So again, in the real world, in the adult world, when most people think of maths, they just think of numbers and maybe a bit of algebra. But so again, at school, when I quite enjoyed maths early on when I was 5, 6, I loved all the number work. And my brain's not always been wired, but I've developed a positive feedback cycle of enjoying work on numbers, times tables, and thinking I'm good at maths. But the thing that I've always moderately struggled with is geometry, because my sense of shape and space in my head, you know those puzzles you get where you have to twist to shape round, work out what it is. Even now, I might talk about it a bit later, but I have a TV series called Monkman and Seagull's Genius Guide, where we drive around the UK. And again, even with the GPS, I find that I take the wrong turning. So geometry has always been something that I've endeavored to be good at, and my algebra of geometry is good, but actually like conceptually visualizing geography, it just never stuck in my head. I don't know, if someone can tell me how I can get better at geometry, I'd greatly appreciate it.
That's really interesting, because when I thought about this, I don't have any problem with geometry. I've always been good at that thing. The thing I had problems with was statistics. And it's not that I couldn't understand it, but I felt I had to work a lot harder. And statistics is very nuanced, but it's also quite counterintuitive. And there's quite a lot of it in physics. There are whole branches of physics called statistical physics. And I could do that. I could do it a bit better when I could relate it to physical things that were moving around. But conditional probabilities, I do remember finding that, just having to think about it, really hard. How about you, Ginny? Do you remember particular things in maths that you?
So in school level maths, it was fractions, and I don't know why, but for some reason, just some of the rules in fractions, just I couldn't visualize, I couldn't sort of compute somehow, and for some reason that was a bit of a sticking point for me. But I worked through it, and I got a handle on it, and I just had to do a bit more rote learning rather than kind of trying really understanding and intuiting like I could in other branches of maths. And then, when I got to university and it kind of went away from numbers and got a bit more conceptual, things got quite difficult. But I was just thinking of a really interesting story, and I cannot remember what the name was, but around geometry, that there's I think it's a quadratic plane, or that there's a shape that mathematicians couldn't work out how to visualize because you can't make it out of paper. And then a lady whose name I cannot remember. And
hyperbolic shapes. You're talking about hyperbolic shapes.
And she crocheted it.
She crocheted it.
Yeah.
And if anyone wants to look up
crochet, I think that will help.
And so these are things which don't exist in Euclidean geometry, which is the sort of thing we're used to with this way and that way and up. I highly encourage you, if you have some time, to look up Hyperbolics, which is Hyperbolic, and they're utterly brilliant because it turns out you can crochet things that don't exist in the real world. Or don't exist like that. Do you want to just talk us through a few of the things that those shapes can do that we don't see in the real world, Bobby?
So one example, potentially, I think if I'm on the right track, is if I can find it. So one of my students, before I went to University Challenge, I was doing my master's part-time and teaching in a school. And one of my students made me a Klein bottle. And I think it's made into a hyperbolic crochet shape. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but it's a shape that, in theory, it's like almost like a Mobius strip, but like a 3D version where the handle goes into the bottle. So in theory, there's an ant. An ant could walk from the outside of the shape to the inside, but without ever leaving one particular surface. They stay on the same surface. So
they don't have to go over the edge, do they?
Yeah, they don't have to go over the edge.
To the other side.
So this doesn't exist. I mean, there's obviously a 3D representation.
Show the underneath of the Klein bottle so we can see, because that's the critical bit. Hold it up. There we go. So what you can see is that the spout that goes through comes out at the bottom.
Yes.
And then so the ant can walk around the side and then into the handle, yes, and then through the handle, and then it's back outside.
Back out. Yes. I tried pouring water in it, but it's not a good idea.
Yeah.
The 3D version of an object doesn't exist in three-dimensional space.
So for those who are interested in crocheted hyperbolic four-dimensional objects, Matt Parker, who does a lot of stuff on Cosmic Shambles, has done a video all about this on his stand-up maths channel. So you can go and look at that as well. Right, we are almost at the end of everything we have time for, but just very quickly, I wanted to ask each of you about things you're doing. So Ginny, you've got your homeschooling things coming up. Have you got anything particularly exciting to tell us about there that's coming up in the next week?
So I've been running for the last 6 weeks an online science club, and the first kind of cohort went really well, and I've decided to put it all up on my website. So I've got about half of the content on there already, so the first 3 weeks, and I'm going to be putting the rest of it up later, in the next week or so, hopefully. So it's each week we're going to look at a different sense or a couple of senses. There's a little video introduction with some demos you can try, and then a worksheet, and you go through all your senses and some extra ones that you might not have come across and how they work together, with lots of fun try at home activities. So you can find that on my website, Ginny Smith Science, and then I think it's /Science Club, but if you go to my homepage there'll be a link.
Great, brilliant. And Bobby, how about you?
So 2 quick things that I've made. So if people follow me Bobby_Seagull, I post all the information. But one is I've got a new BBC TV series coming out Monday, the 18th of May. So it's called Monkman and Seagull's Genius Adventures. 3 one-hour episodes driving around the UK looking at inventions and discoveries from 1750 to 1900. It's bonkers. We even do a steam engine dance, which is crazy. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I normally do lessons on like history, geography, but looking at a numbers perspective of it. So we did a lesson on the ancient Egyptians, looking at the numbers behind the pyramids. We looked at the Tudors and how they made food and the ratios there. So lots of fun for young kids. At Bobby_Seagull on Twitter, Instagram, lots of info there.
Awesome. That all sounds fabulous. Right. So just before we finish, don't forget the rest of the Stay at Home Festival. We'll be here with the question and answer session tomorrow. We being me and Robin Ince and Hannah Fry and John Butterworth. So send us your questions. Please do support us on patreon.com/bookshambles, because that's what lets us make these shows, and we've got lots of plans and we'd like to keep doing them. So if you want to support us, Patreon is a good place to go. So please do that. And yes, there's lots of shows coming up, all sorts of things. There's these Easter documentaries, all kinds of things on the Cosmic Shambles channel. And we've got Sea Shambles, which is very exciting, because we were supposed to do this massive live show at the Royal Albert Hall, all about oceans, just like we did Space Shambles a couple of years ago. Obviously, the Royal Albert Hall isn't open at the moment, so we can't do the live show, but we will be doing lots of the same stuff on a free online show for everybody. So even if you couldn't come to London to see the original show, it will now be free online. And it's this coming Sunday, a week tomorrow, I think. So the 17th of May, look at the Cosmic Shambles website. We have all sorts of people. We've already announced some of the guests, and there are even more to come. There's going to be science and comedy and music. It's all about the sea, and it's just loads of stuff. So do make sure, put that in your diaries, because that is going to be really good. We're really excited about it. And I think that's it for today. So to play us out, as normal, we have Jonny Berliner, the physics teacher with a guitar, and he has his website is scitunes.org, where you can find more of his music. And he is going to play us out with a song all about waves, and I will see you next week.
Move up, move down, then pause the movement around. Move side to side, then spread the movement out wide. Move up, move down, then pause the movement around. Move side to side, then spread the movement out wide.
Up and down, or side to side. Waves are out, vibrations spread with a seismic sound. Trace us is vibrating and watch the ripple spread through. Seismic waves go through the earth, the sound can ripple through air. Light don't need no medium, and that's why it's everywhere.
Up, down, down, side, 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 side,
vibrations in the transverse wave are perpendicular to the direction that the wave will go. Peaks and drops occur. Seismic S waves, water waves, and light are examples, but seismic P and sound waves are longitudinal. They have vibrations parallel to the direction they go. Compressions, rarefactions, form as they shake it to and fro. Up and down, or side to side. Waves are have vibrations spread with a seismic sound or light. Up and down, or to and fro. Transferring energy and information as they go.
move up, move down, spread the movement around.
Ooh, periods of time for one vibration to complete, and the number of waves that pass the point each second's frequency. The amplitude is the middle to the vibration's maximum, and the wavelength is the distance moved when the period is done. Wavelength times by frequency will give a ripple speed, and if you are describing waves, they're all the words you need. Up and down, or side to side. Waves are how vibrations spread with a seismic sound or light. Up and down, or to and fro, transferring energy and information as they go. Make the frequency high, make the frequency low. Turn up the amplitude. Now take it down low when a wave hits a boundary. What's it gonna do? It might refract, get transmitted, yeah, bends and goes right through. It might be reflected, bats use echoes to locate. It might be absorbed and then the temperature will escalate. Up and down, or side to side. Waves are how vibrations spread with a seismic sound or light. Up and down, or to and fro, transferring energy and information as they go. Up and down, or side to side.